The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the Building EQ Portal training. I'm Lilas Pratt at ASHRAE, and our trainer today will be Stephen Roth of Carmel Software. Stephen?
Thanks, Lilas. As Lilas said, my name is Stephen Roth with Carmel Software, and we developed the Building EQ Portal. And today I'm going to do a brief training session with you all to talk about how to use the portal itself. So what is Building EQ exactly? Well, it provides a quick energy analysis that benchmarks a building's energy performance. And Building EQ assists in the preparation of an ASHRAE Level 1 energy audit to identify means to improve a building's energy performance. Now, there are two different evaluations that can be used, the in operation and as designed. In operation compares actual building energy use to use based on metered energy information, and as designed compares potential energy use. Today, I will be demoing the in operation portion of the portal. So prior to the portal, users could apply to get a building EQ label using spreadsheets that could be downloaded from the website. But now we have this portal where all information can be entered online, and it's much more efficient. It has many advantages over the spreadsheets. A couple examples is there's now one centralized source for all of your Building EQ projects. You can create your own account, log in, and view all your projects, edit them, delete them, and many other things. You can invite other users to help you enter your data. So you can own the project, but you can invite other people to help edit the data. But then in the end, you could submit the project. You can perform all types of validation before submission to make sure your data is valid, and then you're not wasting time by submitting a project and then having to update information because it may be flawed or faulty. There's English metric. There'll eventually be language localization. And also you get instant feedback on your score as you're entering your data. So there's a lot of advantages of this portal, and I'm going to show you. So in today's webinar, I'd like to show you how to create a new account, add some projects, and work through an existing project. Now, for the sake of time, I've already registered, so I'll just show you the initial flow of what happens right after you register. Also, after that, I'll show you a project that I've already created and walk you through it. And then I'll show you another project that's half created so I can show you some of the validation. If I was to do all this from scratch, it'd probably take an hour or so. So because we don't have that much time, I will be showing you partially created projects and also partially created login already. So let's get started. All right, so as I mentioned before, I already registered. And when you register, you will receive an email with a code where you can type it in, and then it will confirm your registration so we can avoid any bots or any spam. So now that I've already registered, I'm going to log in as a new user. So when you log in as a brand new user, you see this screen. And on the left is a list of a couple of options that allow you to proceed. So first of all, let's talk about help. So there is a main help page, which is this one. It's always available to you on the left here. You just click it and you'll see an overall help, which you can look through, and it explains in detail how to use the portal. And it also includes definitions and acronyms, and it will eventually include more information too. But this gives you a great overview of how to use the website. In addition, there's help, which we will see in a little bit, context-sensitive help, meaning that it's help that's appropriate to the part of the website that you're in. And I will show you that in a bit. So when you first register and then confirm your registration, you will be taken to your profile page. And the profile page allows you to enter information about yourself, including your address, city, state, etc., the language you want to work with. Currently, only English is available, and eventually French will be available next year. Also, you can enter your credentials, your role, and your interest in Building EQ. Now, let's talk about credentials for a second. If you don't have any of these credentials, you can still enter data, but you cannot submit that project for approval. You can only have a credentialed user submit that project. So that means even if you don't have these credentials, but you have someone on your team, or if you're working with a consulting engineer who has these credentials, you can invite them to join your project, and then you can have them submit the project. So these credentials vary from being a PE or chartered engineer, or a beep or a bemp, which is an ASHRAE which are ASHRAE certifications. Now, if I select any of these, you'll see that I selected the first one, and then it asks me to enter my PE or chartered engineer number. And then I go ahead and make a payment. What does that mean? Well, because it takes some effort to confirm if you are a PE or chartered engineer, ASHRAE does require a payment, which you can do using this interface here. But if you are merely a beep or bemp, you don't have to pay, since we can immediately confirm whether you are by pinging the ASHRAE database. All right, so let's move on. So assuming that I've entered my user profile, I now create an account. Now, account is a description of the company that I work with, okay? And then within my account, I can have all my projects. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to enter a test account number. And it will autofill in some information, and I'll tell a little bit about what my firm does. I'm going to click Save. All right, so I created an account. Now look on the left here. It's increased the number of menu options because I've created my account. Now I can start creating projects. I can start adding users to my account and then assign them projects that I want them to help me work on. I can also group my projects into campuses and portfolios, which currently doesn't really affect the calculations or the labels or anything right now, but we will be using this in the future. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through this. But let's talk about projects. So I click project, and because I have a brand new account, I have no projects. I can go ahead and create a new project, and I can do that by clicking Add New Project. Then I can type in my new project name, a description, whether they're English or metric units, notes for ASHRAE that I want ASHRAE to view when I do eventually submit this project for them to review. Currently, this will be only an in-operation project, but I can either do in operation or as designed or both. And then also whether I need to accept the terms of service and enter my initials. Now you'll notice that this is grayed out. The reason is I'm not credentialed yet. So in fact, I can go back and select a credential here. Oh, it's asking me, well, let me enter this for the sake of time. It'll autofill in, great. Let's do that again. Okay, I'm gonna enter that information. All right, so now I'm credentialed. I go to my project. I'm gonna add a new project. And now, oh, still not letting me do that. Oh, I need to relog in, that's why. I'm gonna relog in. Create a new project. There we go. And I can read the terms of service. So I'm gonna enter a new project name. English units, test only, and it's going to be an in-operation project. And I'm going to click Save. All right, so now I've created my new project. I can always go back and edit that data if I want. But most importantly, I can now start entering all the information about that project. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to show you an actual project that I previously created where I've entered all the data. So I'm actually going to switch over to another screen here. I'm going to log in. And I'll show you one of the test projects that I created, 1000 Northgate Drive. So I'm going to click Manage I/O. Now this is kind of the meat and potatoes of this whole portal. This now includes all the inputs I need to enter information about my project. So you can see the way we have this arranged. We have 5 tabs. And within each tab, we have what are called accordions. And these are kind of, think of them as sections or subsections. And within each tab and within each accordion, I can expand my accordion and then collapse it. So what this does is this organizes the information in a very efficient way, but also doesn't overwhelm the user because there's a lot of inputs in the portal. So if you saw all those inputs at once, it would be quite overwhelming. So what we did is we organized it in this way, so it doesn't look as intimidating as overwhelming. So there's still a lot of information, but it's organized in a way where you can easily enter data, view it, or hide it. You can also save it and come back. You don't have to enter everything at once. So you can save and come back the next day if you want. So I'm going to show you how all that works. So the other thing about this portal and this part of the portal is that you get constant feedback. in terms of whether the data you've entered is correct or not. And I'll show you this in a bit, but it will show you validation text warnings or errors in red or yellow. If it's red, it's an error, and that means you need to correct that for you to submit it to ASHRAE. If it's in yellow, it's a warning, meaning that it's suggesting that you make the update, but you don't have to. You can still submit the project to ASHRAE. And then if everything's okay within an accordion, you'll see on the right-hand side a green arrow, meaning that everything's okay in that accordion. You don't have to re-enter the data or update anything, and you can move on. So let me show you an example of a yellow sign here. And what this means is that there is a validation warning within this accordion. And as I mentioned, the warning is merely a suggestion for you to update data. It doesn't prevent you from submitting this project to ASHRAE. So you'll see here that this warning says the relative humidity is suggested is normally less than 60%. Meanwhile, we've entered values of 66. Not a big deal. It'll still let you submit, but you may want to edit that data. And in my other project, I'll show you an example of an error which prevents you from submitting. Okay, so let's go through some of these accordions, and let's talk about the data that we're entering. And as I mentioned, for the sake of time, I've entered all the data required to submit this project. If I was starting from scratch, it would take me a little while to do that, and that's not the purpose of this webinar today. So, first of all, if you remember a little while ago, I did talk about the help. So we have that overall help, which I displayed, but we also have this context-sensitive help, meaning you can click this little help icon, and it will bring up a help pop-up that describes what, say, this accordion is all about and what you need to do. Then even within the accordion, some of the inputs may have little help icons next to them explaining in detail what that particular input is all about. And we'll be adding more, as time goes on, but you'll see that there are various little help icons explaining to you what these various inputs mean. All right, so when you first start out, you start out with the far left tab, Building Characteristics, and within that you have 4 accordions: Building Demographics, Climate Information, Building Characteristics, and Building Performance Credentials. Now, if any of you are familiar with the spreadsheets, you'll see that there is a correlation between the organization of the spreadsheet and the organization of this, but there are also differences too. So we try to lay it out to make a little bit more sense in terms of the flow of how you're going to enter the data. So a lot of the terminology is the same between the two, but the flow may differ a little bit. So let's look at Building Demographics. So as the name implies, you're going to enter your information about the building itself, building contact information, and the assessor name. So probably the most important information here is the building type. Now these building types, as you can see, are categorized, and you select the building type that most closely approximates the building that you are working with. But then you also need to select the country and state, as you can see, the green text. So what does the green mean? Well, there are different types of buildings here. As you see, there's different categories, but there's also what are called Energy Star qualified buildings types versus non-Energy Star qualified building types. So what happens when you select an Energy Star qualified building type is that we will be able to ping what's called an architectural 2030 zero tool to calculate the median EUI. And how do you know if you've selected one? Well, I'll show you that in a bit. But for that architectural 2030 zero tool to work, you need to enter the proper inputs where the text labels are green. So in this case, I've entered Administrative Professional Office in the United States, the state of California, okay? Now, when I'm done entering all this data, I click Save. So you can save data for each accordion and then come back to it later. So now let's move on to climate information. So here is where I enter my climate zone. As you can see, your typical climate zones here, your heating degree days and your cooling degree days, your source of climate data, and the period of data. And then next, I'm going to click my Building Characteristics tab. And this allows me to enter my gross floor area, conditioned floor area, separately metered area. It subtracts it out to get my net rated floor area. Then I enter information about the number of floors and the construction date. And then you'll see here, there's this green button, Energy Star building type. So this button only appears if you selected a building type that is Energy Star qualified. So what happens when I click that button is a pop-up form appears, as you can see here. And it automatically fills in the data that I entered previously, including my floor area, my heating degree days, my cooling degree days, and I can override those for this form if I want. But then there's additional parameters that are required by the Architectural 2030 tool that is asking for. Now, a lot of this data is auto-filled in, but you may want to override it. For example, what are my weekly operating hours? Number of workers on main shift, number of computers, percent that can be cooled and heated. Then I'm going to click Get EUI Values, and it's going to automatically fill in the median site EUI and my median source EUI. If I click Close and go down to the bottom and Save, what it's going to now do is it's going to fill in my median EUI based upon that call I made to the Zero tool for this Energy Star qualified building type. All right. So elsewhere in this accordion, the building characteristic accordion, we can enter a building description. Then we can enter a description of any major renovations that have occurred with the building. So you can see here, and you can add as many as you want. Description of systems commissioned. You can delete or add as many as you want. Any energy efficiency improvements and other operational features. So this allows you to really tell the ASHRAE administrator what has been done to this building over time. So once I've entered all that data, I can move on to the building performance credentials accordion, which allows me to enter any awards energy-wise that have been awarded to this building, whether we're talking NBI Core Performance, BOMA, USGBC LEED, Green Globes. Go back. And allows me to enter up to 4 here. And I can also talk about whether it's designed to meet state or provincial energy codes, and also whether it's designed to meet ASHRAE AEDG. Then I can save that information. And as you can see up top here, you get a little notice saying that it's been successfully saved. And these notices appear up top whenever you do any type of saving or anything related. All right, so we've entered the required information for our building characteristics. Oh yeah, one more thing I want to go over before I move on. I can also model multi-use buildings or multi-use properties. If I select multi-use property, you'll see what happens down here is a sub-accordion appears within my building demographics accordion. If I expand that, it now allows me to enter multiple building use types, including the areas for each and the hours of operation, and it will automatically calculate the median UI according to standard 100 based upon my inputs here. So this allows you to deal with a building that has multiple building use types. The thing is, though, your total area here must equal the total net area that you entered under your building characteristics. You can also enter separately metered excluded space information here, which the total should also equal the value entered under the building characteristics accordion. So just wanted to show you that because this is also available in the spreadsheet if you're familiar with that. So let's switch back. And in fact, I'm not going to switch back. I'm going to say I'm not going to save it. Go back. All right. So now we're going to move on to the Energy tab. So the Energy tab allows us to import or enter real-time or real utility information for various types of fuel types. So let's talk about electricity. So I've already entered data here. So I enter monthly data, including kilowatt hours for the month and the total cost. And then it totals it down here. So you should really enter a year's worth of data. And that year's worth of data should probably have ended within the past 6 months to a year. If you don't, you will get a warning. The nice thing about this also is you can import data from Portfolio Manager. So if you already have data in Portfolio Manager, live, real live electricity data, meter data, you can go into Portfolio Manager, save as Excel, then import that Excel into this, and it will automatically populate this. So it'll save you from having to do double entry. So down here is where I enter additional electric utility information, including total kWh used in my peak month, my peak electrical demand, the month of the peak. I also enter energy rate information here. So the information that's really used to calculate your building EQ score is your total kilowatt hour, which is actually converted to site energy in kBTU and source energy. I can also enter other fuel types, including natural gas, LP gas, steam, etc. Now, if you have multiple meters, just enter it under additional fuel type and select. If you have another electrical meter, just enter kWh and enter that additional. So when you've entered all your information here, it will be added up, and I'm not going to save that. It's going to be added up here, and you'll see your total site and source energy. If you have any renewable energy, it will credit that, and then it will total it here. And then using all of the data, including your total source energy divided by your gross floor area or your net rated floor area, it will calculate your source EUI. And then it takes your median EUI, which we got from the Architectural 2030 Zero tool, do the math, and calculate your building EQ performance score. So you'll see that value is both here and also up top here. So at all times, you can view this score as you're entering data. Energy end use is more for reference only, has no bearing on the calculations themselves, but allows you to enter your kBTU per foot squared year value for different energy use types, and it will display a pie chart with that data. Okay, let's move on to the IEQ screening tool. So this allows you to enter information about your indoor environmental quality characteristics of your building. And as you can see here, there are 5 tabs. Here you can enter review of IEQ and thermal comfort conditions. You can enter text about it. And as you can see, once again, none of this information has a bearing on the score. It's more for ASHRAE admin to get an idea of what the building's all about. Space by space measurements, you can enter information about your spaces, including the temperature, relative humidity, CO2 content, and other information. Lighting quality, enter a description of your lighting, and then enter specific information about the lighting in each of your spaces. Let me show you an example of adding a row of data. Very easy. Room 4, office 2, description, foot candles, click save. And as you can see, it saves my data. Review of ventilation for indoor quality. So here you can answer questions about your original design intent, which version of ASHRAE 62.1 you're referring to, what's the method, 62.1 method that you used, did you use the spreadsheet? Then you can also enter information about the flow rates in various areas of your building. And then there's other information down here. And finally, survey of air distribution systems. Here you describe your HVAC system type. Then if you have multiple systems, you can describe each of them, including the schedule, the distribution system, the controls, the coil cleanliness, duct liner, MERV filter level, return air plenum. And you can add as many as you want. Just click this button and you'll see another system has been added. You can enter information about that. And I'll delete it. So this is a description of your building. Next, energy efficiency measures, EEMs. There's 6 tabs here, categorized by different types of EEMs. Building envelope, and you'll see that there's drop downs here. These are pre-populated. You can select them and enter the low and upper cost and what you think the payback will be. And you can add as many as you want. Let me show you an example of a validation error. So I'm going to select an EEM, and I'm going to enter a low cost that's higher than an upper cost, and I won't select the payback. Now I'm going to click save. So you'll see here, I have an error. Because I have an error, it will not let me submit. So that error displays a red X in the upper right-hand portion of the accordion. And it also explains to me what my errors are. And what the error is telling me is that my low cost obviously must be lower than my upper cost. And also, I need to select the payback, period. So this is an example of validation error. So if I go ahead and correct that situation, and then click Save, you'll see that the validation errors disappear and it's back to green. Now I can move on to lighting and daylighting. So these are EEMs specific to lighting and daylighting. And once again, you can select any of them, enter the lower or upper cost, and payback. And then the remaining accordions are the same: HVAC system type, EEMs, refrigeration, energy generation, and then other. Now we also allow you to add your own EEMs here, free text. And the same rules apply: lower cost, upper cost, and payback. And you can enter up to 3. But we suggest that you really enter the ones or select the ones that are provided to you in the dropdowns. Okay, so we've entered all our EEMs. Let's move on to photos and attachments. So you can actually attach photos to this project and also attachments, either PDFs, spec sheets, Word docs, Excel, whatever. So you click photos, and as you can see, I have a couple here already. You can choose a photo, upload it, it will display it here. You enter a description of that photo, and the image type. Will be expanding this list, but this is the list for now. And then click the little check button to register everything. So this is a list of your photos. All right, so we've entered all our information here. And since everything is green, even if it's yellow, it's still fine. We can click the Submit button. Now, when I click the Submit button, well, a couple things. One is this Submit button will not be enabled unless you are credentialed. So if you're not credentialed, so in other words, if you invite a user who you want to help you enter this data, and they're not credentialed, they will not be able to submit. You don't want them to submit because maybe you want to submit, or you want your PE or your beeper bent to submit. So that button is only available to credentialed users. Even when that button is enabled, like it is right now, if I have an error, it will show me a message saying, hey, you have some errors that you need to correct before submitting. So the advantage of this over the spreadsheets is, because there's over 100 different types of validations, it's going to make sure that the data that you've entered is correct. And then we're not wasting everyone's time by sending data to ASHRAE admins, them having to send it back to you to re-enter, because there's over 100 validations that this project must pass before you can even submit it to ASHRAE. So now that we've passed all our validations, I click Submit, and you see all project data has been validated. You can actually submit it. And I'm not going to do it right now, but I click OK, and then it's submitted. ASHRAE admins receive an email alert, then they log into their admin portal, and they can look at this project. And if everything looks okay, they approve it. You receive an email, and then you are able to print out the label and the disclosure and the level 1 audit and anything else. So that's kind of how it works. So for the sake of time, I will show you some examples of the reports that the portal produces. So bear with me for 1 second as I bring them up. All right. So actually, let me go back here. So to access the reports, once you've submitted and gotten approved, you can, in fact, before you're approved, you can only access the user input report, which I'll show you in a bit. The other 3 reports you cannot access until your project has been approved by ASHRAE. Once they've been approved, these links will become enabled, and you'll be able to download the various reports. Currently, therefore, there'll be more as time progresses. So first of all, let's look at the label. So this is the actual label that's produced. It includes your building EQ score, the name of your project, including the address, when you perform the assessment, and it includes a building EQ logo and ASHRAE logo. So this you can actually print out and post it on your building. The next report is your disclosure certificate. And this includes building ID information, including separately metered data, your totals, and your total score down here. And if you were doing AD, it would fill in the information on the left. So this is your disclosure certificate. Next is your input report. This report can be printed out at any time. And this is basically a PDF that includes all of your inputs. So you can view what you've inputted at any time. It's a long report, 14 pages. And it basically just goes accordion by accordion of all the data that you've entered. And then finally, there is the level 1 audit report, which I won't show you currently. It's still a work in progress, but you can also download that. And that's according to Standard 211. So those are the reports that you can display at this time. Now I can go back to my project list here at any time, and I can view all of my projects. If I want to assign users to different projects, invite users, meaning, engineers, architects, BEEPs or BEMS, whatever, I go to my user menu option, I click add user, and I can type in the username, email, and at this time, just a regular user. Click save, and that user will actually receive an email inviting them to your account. And once they log in and confirm, then they will be available to you to assign them to a project. So the way you do that is the user will be listed here. You click projects, and you can assign them one or more projects that they have access to. And then they will be able to edit those projects. And if they're not a BEEP or event, they will not be able to submit, but they'll be able to edit them. And then once they've entered data or edited them, then you can go ahead and submit. All right, I want to show you an example of a relatively new project very quickly to kind of show you the different types of validation that's occurring. So for example, under building demographics, you can see all of these validation errors have occurred because I've literally entered no data in this accordion. So this is all the validation just in this accordion alone. So if I try to submit, you're going to see, well, it's asking me to accept the TOS, the terms of service. But even if I had accepted the TOS, it's going to tell me, well, you know what, you have some accordions which has data that's invalid, and also you haven't entered data for any of these other accordions. So you have to pretty much enter all the data and enter all the data correctly for you to be able to submit your project to an ASHRAE admin. Here's another example. I pretty much click save without entering any data, and you can see all the different validation errors that occur. Now, as I mentioned, there's over 100, almost 120 validations that occur total throughout the entire portal here. And then finally, you can back up and restore a project. What this means is, suppose I've entered all my data, and I kind of want to do a what-if analysis, but I want to be able to restore the data after I've done the what-if analysis. What you can do is back up, and all it will do is create a copy of your project in the background. And then you can go ahead and edit your data, see how it changes your score. And then once you're done editing it, click restore, and it will restore your data back to its original form. Now, it only does one backup at a time. So if you create another backup, it will overwrite the previous backup. So that's what this allows you to do. All right, that's pretty much my overview of the in-operation portion of the ASHRAE Building EQ portal. Back to you, Lilas.
Stephen, there's one more thing you might want to show them. What we've talked about is being a credentialed user and being able to submit for a rating. But you could also use the tool simply to calculate the score and not do any of the other information. All of the other information that isn't involved in the calculation of the score is there to help with the preparation of a level 1 energy audit. But let's say you just wanted to get a score. why don't you show them the difference between the green inputs and the blue inputs, and how that they can use the green inputs just to get a score?
Sure. So you're talking about an Energy Star qualified building?
No. Any building, if you go into the building demographics, for example, in order to get a score, you go into a project, in order to get a score, just a rating for a building without having to do the level 1 energy audit stuff, you need to put in the building type. You need to put in any building type. It doesn't matter what building type it is. You need to put in heating degree days, the cooling degree days, the climate zone. All the fields that are in green as opposed to in blue will allow you to get a score up top, even if you don't want to do the level 1 energy audit and submit for a rating. All the level 1 energy information is required to submit for a rating, but you can get a score without doing all that.
Yes. So yeah, I did show that a little bit. So as you can see here, I've selected my building type, my country and state, and then within my climate information, I entered my climate zone, my heating and cooling degree day information, and finally under building characteristics, my floor area. And then once all that information is entered, in this case,
of course,
it's an Energy Star type building. I'm sorry?
And of course, the energy data.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and also the energy data, yes, to calculate your source EUI. So the median EUI is derived either from your Energy Star API here, or if this is not an Energy Star type building, let me select one that is not.
It just uses a different methodology to get the median EUI.
Yeah, it uses standard 100.
Right.
So you'll see that the green button is not there anymore, so it's using standard 100, and it calculates its own median EUI. And then the source EUI comes from your actual utility data divided by your net floor area to get your source EUI, and then it calculates your performance score. So yeah, Lila is right. You can indeed just calculate your score in the event that you don't want to submit it, or you just want to see what your building rates, how your building rates.
Stephen, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. If anyone has any questions after the presentation, and would like, after viewing the presentation, and would like to get those questions answered, please just send an email to buildingeq@ashrae.org, and we will be happy to answer your questions. And if there's nothing else, that will be the end of today's training.